Hi, my name's John Galling. I'm Education Safeguarding Officer, part of the Safeguarding team for Babcock LDP. I'm going to talk in this podcast about the recruitment of staff and the safeguarding expectations during the COVID-19 pandemic. The most important thing to say about this is that it is business as usual in terms of the expectations on the checks that we should be undertaking from a safeguarding viewpoint, despite the fact that we're not able to perhaps personally meet candidates at the moment with the expectations on social distancing. Many schools are looking at systems such as Zoom or Microsoft Teams to have those interactions, so clearly we're going to link to how perhaps some of those checks can be done. Starting the process with shortlisting, it's really important that schools and settings remember that they should still be shortlisting candidates against a criteria, and that there should be a minimum of 2 staff who do that shortlisting, one of whom has a safer recruitment qualification. It's really also important that we look at those applications and we scrutinise against gaps, both in the dates of their employment, education, but also the narrative that they provide us with to ensure that we have specific questions, if required, for specific candidates where we can scrutinise those. When looking and talking to candidates who you have shortlisted, the advice is that you would ask them perhaps to hold up some form of ID, their passport, photo driving licence or similar document, so that you can obviously check their ID, but also that gives you an indication also of their right to work in UK. Your current DBS provider, so if it's Devon, they will still be able to advise you for successful candidates on how to process DBS, but at this time the expectation is just the same as it would have been before the COVID-19 pandemic. So when interviewing candidates, it's really important that you still ask and inquire after their safeguarding knowledge to make sure that they have obviously some knowledge of safeguarding. But as ever, I would also advise that we start thinking very much around how do we scrutinise a candidate's values for safeguarding. Questions often around the principles of whistleblowing, or indeed the principles around disclosure and how they would perhaps react if a child made a disclosure to them, both about supporting the child at an appropriate way, but also maybe the personal impact to them of hearing a child disclose to them are good topics perhaps to explore somebody's morals and values around safeguarding, as well as just their subject knowledge. So we've interviewed our candidate, we've chosen our successful candidate, and as always you would be very, very wise and expected to ensure that a conditional offer is made. Clearly that's more likely going to be an email now, and that conditional offer should still have aspects linked to references, it should still have aspects linked to successful DBS, and indeed qualifications in the sight of that you're going to need to see before you can formalise that offer. Clearly at the moment, while candidates can't come into school under current measures, at a later date you are still going to need to see those original documents and include those in your single central record, just the same as you would do at any other time. We've recently updated all of our 1-minute guides, and the single central record 1-minute guide is available on the Babcock LDP website under the Safeguarding Team tab. So if you've got any questions around the single central record, have a look there, but also most of you will be familiar that the expectations for all of the recruitment processes, and including the single central record, are within Keeping Children Safe 2019, and it's part 3, again, that a lot of you I know will be very familiar with. So successful candidates are still going to need to bring in their documents at the point at which they actually start in school. But the advice that we would give at this time, if at all possible, is perhaps that those could be scanned and sent across to the appointing officer, the head teacher, perhaps, so that they've got copies of those that can then be retained for file at the point at which they start. But please, it's really important that we still see the originals. The single central record should be completed as normal with all the current relevant tabs, and again the template for the single central record as stands at the moment is also available on our website. Some of you will be mindful of the fact that Keeping Children Safe 2020, the consultation for that had started before this current pandemic situation. It's been postponed at the moment. I'm not expecting from that consultation for there to be any significant changes in recruitment. It just looks like that if they go ahead with the consultation as came out, that the recruitment process in Keeping Children Safe 2020 will be in more of a logical order as when you would do things from interviewing and then going on to potentially appoint and then induct a candidate. On that note, induction of candidates who are successful clearly is going to be potentially a bit different as well. and many of you will be already using communication with your staff through, as I say, Teams or Zoom. So really it's making sure that as much of your induction perhaps is done ahead of time, but it should also be the case that candidates have had access to policies, procedures, but perhaps more importantly they know very clearly who to ask if they've got any questions, who is more likely to be the designated safeguarding lead, and that they should have access to those both through email and other forms of communication. So key messages are: recruitment is as normal. Utilise your video links to see documents to certify yourselves that the candidate who they say they are. Think very much around, for successful candidates, letters that are requiring exactly the same checks to be done, and that once you've got those, have those scanned and sent across to you if at all possible, for retention on personnel files as normal. If you've got any questions, if there's anything that you feel you need support or help with at this time, then please don't hesitate to get in touch with myself or indeed any of the team, and hopefully you found this podcast useful.